Well, the name of this sermon could be There Is More Trust Somewhere. This week I got calls every day telling me a federal agent needed my Social Security information. I got emails about being hacked and how I needed to turn over my passwords. And at least 10 of you got an email from me asking for iTunes gift cards. Is that right? None of these were real. All of them were annoying. And all made me question what I could trust. Now, if you got an email from me about supporting the annual canvas, that was real. This is part of the end of our series on Connect, how we connect with each other in the modern world, as part of the theme year of being human. The questions are, can you trust the world, and can the world trust you? So I ask you first, can you trust me? Why and why not? There's been a lot of damage done to trust in people who wore robes and stoles. But I ask you, can you trust me? Because I do trust you. And I trust you because of the strength of this community and its history and the foundation of love that grows in this place. So I've been thinking about trust. The great thing about the story that Beth and I read today is how innocent the trust is in Joe DiMaggio. Just because he was a baseball star in the 1940s, it was certainly a different time in the 80s, I guess. Because the world of trusting sports stars to have the integrity, no less to care for your 5-year-old while you deal with a cantankerous mother, are gone. But the story in some way is a parable for who you can trust and why. Characters who stand firm and grounded when you suffer or when you're in despair seem to be the people that are building trust. And the people who abandon you, even though they're expected to stand with you, maybe you can't. The world we live in, for better or worse, has a lot less trust in it. Less trust for the idols of our lives, sports stars, the stars of the silver screen, TV anchors, police, politicians, you name it, clergy. We have lost some faith, and for good reason. Because faith was tied to a trust that was damaged by abuse of power, cheating, selfish actions, careless words, divisive actions. All add up to 2 tragedies, one for the abused and the cast out and the damaged and the destroyed lives among us, and 2 for the loss of trust that we have in the world. I'm guessing you're like me. You find yourself checking what phone number is calling you. I know you do that because we call you and you don't pick up the phone. It's 214-884-1200. If we call you, it's okay. It's okay. I delete emails I think are sent by Russian hackers. I ignore social media I know is being manipulated. I hope to God my parents don't pick up and reveal their Social Security numbers to fake agents on the phone. The list goes on. The sum total of these things are that they chip away at our confidence in society. And I haven't even started in on impeachment hearings and the highest office in our land. If the goal of this current rendition of our government was to have us all lose faith in it, we are at a tipping point, at least I am. But it'd be good to remember that we have a system that was set up to prosper some and fail others from the beginning, that not everyone ever had faith in the governing system, but it was created to keep our confidence in justice. And I'm having my doubts. Indulge me for a moment, though. James Madison said, "What is government but the greatest of all reflections on human nature?" Ben Franklin said, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary." And Alexander Hamilton said, in framing a government, you must first enable the government to control the governed, and next oblige it to control itself. Then and now, and that's how I feel, then and now the problem was and is how to create a strong, responsible government when governors and the governed were not to be trusted. We have seen the movie playing out in Congress today before, and not just in 1974. It would be good to remember our history. Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th president, had in his administration his 3 brothers-in-law who were convicted of fraud, his 2 vice presidents who were convicted of bribery, his attorney general who was convicted on extortion, his secretary of the Treasury who was convicted on theft, his secretary of the Interior on land fraud, and over 20 top officials convicted of crimes. Warren Harding, the first America First president, had in his midst the Secretary of the Interior, convicted of bribery, Secretary of the Navy, convicted of extortion, a Postmaster General, convicted of fraud, an Attorney General, convicted of graft, and over 100 convictions of government officials. Harding had a mistress and an illegitimate child and died mysteriously of ptomaine poisoning. The list goes on all through our government's history. We're not just living in a challenging moment now. It's amazing that we trust anyone actually to govern us. But to not trust at all is the poison of our society. And that poison seeps into us, and it is changing us. So what can we trust, and can we be trusted? If this was a common Christian church, the answer would be easy. You know what the answer is? Trust God, right? The Christian story follows the Jewish stories. Trust God, Samuel, Jonah, Paul, Ananias. Old stories point to the same thing. God says, go and do something dangerous and it'll all be okay. There were Christian stories of the same to prove that Jesus was God. There's a story about a man named Ananias. He could be the Jonah of the Christian scriptures. God hits Ananias with a vision, says, Ananias, and immediately Ananias says, yes, master. Get up and go to Straight Avenue. Ask at the house of Judas for a man from Tarsus. His name is Saul. We know him as Paul. Ananias protested, Master, you can't be serious. Everybody's talking about this man and the terrible things he is doing, his reign of terror against your people in Jerusalem. And now he's shown up here with papers from the chief priest that give him license to do the same to us. But the master said, don't argue, go. The words of God. Ananias went and laid hands on Saul like God said, all the way thinking he would be killed, thinking how unfair it was for him to do this. He laid hands on Saul and prayed, and Saul became Paul. This, of course, is the Jonah story, the kind of story that emphasizes how you aren't enough if you don't love God enough to go do something dangerous and reckless in the name of God. And I don't think that's a very good lesson. But in this version, in this Father's knows best version, so he goes, he returns home, and all is well. Trust God is the message. We've heard that many times, and it doesn't work for most of us here, possibly. I'm not saying it's an entirely bad idea. I'm saying it just doesn't satisfy me. I myself have had the Spirit or the voice of God turn me around in my own life. Not so much to correct a wrong that I was doing, but in an attempt to get me to live into purpose, to try to build a life of integrity and community, to grow the bonds of life. So I'm not tempting fate in arguing with the notion, trust God. I'm just saying there's something more. I was on my way at one point in my 20s to a monastery in South Korea to live in a stark and isolated life. The words of my awakening that I heard in my ear, whether they were external or internal, I do not argue, were return home and serve your people. Those words were the beginning of my really thinking of others as my purpose. Seeking community in which to be known and seen and building the bonds of love with those beyond my family. I know I trusted them, but I didn't externalize them to a point of abandoning my own faculties. And that is why I like the Buddhist version of the trust narrative. It says 3 are going to the monastery. They are robbed of all their possessions. This is also a kung fu TV series, if you watch that show. When they arrived at the monastery, they were asked by the abbot what they learned. The first one said, trust no one. The second one said, trust but be wary. And the third said, trust everyone. Who was right? The Buddha asked. And of course, the Buddha doesn't answer. But the Buddha responded, trust that it might help one another. The word trust refers to relying on someone or something for a future action. It's having confidence and dependence on the character, the ability, the strength, or the truth of someone or something. From this perspective, trust is a contingent emotional feeling, highly conditional in nature and subject to reappraisal, as our character in our story had to reappraise about her mother. Trust is a means to find freedom from the endless cycle of fear and wanting, and forming real bonds of love between us. That is why it is so important. Why I center in my life and my life of faith and in my book, in fact, trust as a portion of your faith. It's why I'm so distressed at our world that is teaching us and our children at every turn not to trust anyone. Because life is actually literally impossible without trust. It must come from each of us in our lives. We count on trust for food and medicine and safety and all the material necessities of life. Every time your partner says, I will do the dishes if you will put the baby to bed, you are acting on trust. Am I right? Yes, parents. I've been there. Every time you go to work expecting to be paid and the money you get on this worthless paper or some electronic record is honored by the bank, we act on trust in society. Every time I say to you that I will treat you with respect, and I know you will treat me with respect. Every time I say I can trust you with who I am, and you can trust me with who you are, the fabric of our lives is strengthened. When we fail each other, the fabric that supports us weakens. And it is true, the fabric of trust is delicate and easily torn. When a transactional trust is replaced by adversarial advantage-seeking, we see the dog-eat-dog kind of mentality, the fittest survive mindset come to bear, and trust falls into the shadows with generosity. And law is the only restraint we can impose. That is when we know we're in trouble. Can you be trusted? Can the world trust you? That's not just a sermon title. It's a spiritual reminder that what you do to form bonds of love and trust in the world heals it. It is a spiritual practice of character building through intention and discipline, which refines our very being while joining us to each other. It is grounded in our being who we say we are, in doing what we say we will do, in attending to each other with a deep attention and love. The poet T.S. Eliot captured the essence of what I'm saying in these lines from the Four Quartets, and he wrote, "Love is most nearly itself when here and now ceases to matter." He's not talking about indifference. He is saying that you can afford to care more, to be vulnerable, to meet difficulty in life directly, because it is in your ability to care and to love and to manifest your values that matter, to show up for what matters in your life, to do the best to grow the bonds of love in every situation you can, while acknowledging the outcomes might be out of your control. But the manifestation of all of who you are can be trust in the world. And this must be true, because trust is such a crucial ingredient in feeling related to each other, in allowing us to love unselfishly and to see another's core goodness, the spiritual value of our faith. It is not that you trust your loved ones and expect they will never hurt you. Hurt and disappointment are part of the human experience. You trust so that the relationships you are in unfold, grow, and create bonds that don't only strengthen who you are, but strengthen the world. Can you trust me? Can I trust you? Thank you for that. Can the world trust you? These are the questions that come from a deep despair that I have about what I see in our world. But they are also part of the spirit of healing that comes when we don't give in to fake news and a suspicion of each other and projecting world events and the events in the lives of abusive people onto our lives. I know it is possible. I know it is real. It is important. It is faith that we grow in our lives for the good of all. That we listen for God, but also make choices that build integrity into our lives. So friends, ignore the emails and the fake calls. Discern the news. Pray for our country and not just for its downfall. And tell your parents not to tell anyone their Social Security number who calls. And don't send me iTunes gift cards. Rather, build up the bonds of love and trust in your life. It will matter far beyond your own. Amen.